Lori, why don't we start with introducing yourself to the group?
So delighted to join this amazing brain trust of leaders in our industry. My name is Lori Rowlandson. I'm a senior vice president at a global facilities management company called BGIS. And my key role is around strategy and innovation and operationalizing innovation.
Great. David, do you want to give a brief introduction on who you are? And I've met you through Dan Tubbs, and Dan's been tapping into you for some AI leadership and support.
Yeah, I dabble in AI a good bit. I've spent some time in it recently here. I'm very interested in the space, so I'm eager to hear what the group is thinking about focusing on.
And you've got several papers that you've written on AI, and describe the company that you've got as well.
I have a couple that are in different stages. So in my background, I was successful as an entrepreneur in marketing automation, software creator. And one thing led to another. And after that era, I joined a venture capital firm here in Boston. I never really could snuff out my desire to create. And so I kind of started my own incubator on the side and have been launching startups and have had several successful across a variety of ventures. I started with automation, slipped into crypto for a while, and then after crypto moved into AI around 2021, 2022. I've written a bunch of papers on a bunch of different topics. I tend to write a lot, probably because I read a lot. The papers that I've been writing most recently have been in regards to the internet and how it's used by agents as opposed to humans, and some of the deep-rooted problems in the way that we have architected things to use existing frameworks for agents and re-envisioning how that might be done. I've released a couple of open source products now, packages, frameworks that incorporate this. The W3C has picked up one of them. So now it's being introduced as a spec, hopefully that we can push towards as a global framework for agents to use as opposed to the DOM in case we get into the nitty gritty of it, as opposed to the CDP, the Chrome developer profile, and the DOM that is currently traversed by agents. It's excessive, it's bloated, it's got a lot of stuff that you don't need from an agent's perspective. I won't get into the nuances of it, but that's the world in which I've been living in recently. I've also been really struck with the speed and the pace of this innovation, unlike anything that I've experienced before. And I've had the opportunity to be witness to some incredibly fast growth rates in the past, the traditional hockey stick. And this is just something that's truly phenomenal to be witnessing and being a part of in the midst of it, that growth curve, and most people not really even fully understanding it and feeling a little bit like I see what's kind of coming, and there's a lot that's coming. And I think it's an interesting opportunity, quite frankly, because it starts to make people really have questions that are a little more existential than what software should I write? And that's the things that I think start to really become interesting to me.
Thank you for that. And Luke, you want to introduce yourself and your new rabbit hole?
I'm Luke Asper, the founder of Asper Studios here in Dallas. We're a story-led video production company that serves companies that sell trust at a very high price point. So think luxury auto, wealth management, custom builders. With AI flooding the market now, the only thing that helps sell and close a 6-7 figure decision is a human face on camera. And so that's what we are trying to execute. This past month, I've restructured my business all through AI, trying to go from solo freelancer from the past years to building a business. And now with AI, I see it's very possible and easy to execute with, especially with friends like Rex and everyone here. So I'm just glad to be here.
Yeah. Daniel, do you want to recap your business?
Sure. I'm more in the consulting space. Rex invited me into this AI mastermind because I'm interested in it and I'm friends with David. And I think that exploring the opportunities, because it goes beyond having chatbots and having AI write an email for me, right? And you all know this, but it's continuing to explore like how utilizing agents and skills within agents to interact with one another and do the work, right? So we're working on executives. I do executive search, I do fundraising, I do training, I do Genius Spark. Just finished a 2-week session with a client installing Genius Spark in their organization. So dabble in a lot of different things. So that's pretty much where I am.
Yeah. And Amanda, are you online?
Sorry, I'm driving. Yep. So
Okay.
I'm just listening in today. Hi, everybody. It's Amanda Schneider.
Part of the theme for today was just talking about the challenges and the lessons learned for those involved in the enterprise-wide change management side of the equation. So that would be Ryan, and that would be Craig, and that would be Lori, primarily on the enterprise-wide. So I'd like to hear from Lori what you're doing, what you're learning, where the challenges you're facing. Craig Jansen and I were talking the other day about an MIT report that came out, and the bottom line, whether you look at the percentages of success and failure, failure in any change, enterprise-wide change initiative is really high. And it all gets down into the people side of the equation. It's not the technology, it's not the process, it's the adoption side of the cycle. So Lori, I'd love to hear what you guys are doing, what you're learning, and what's next for you, what problems you're trying to solve in the process.
Yeah, no problem, Rex. Quite a few things to unpack there, but one of the best things that we did early on was we had the whole team certified with a ProSci and using the ADKAR methodology. And it helped the entire team speak the same language of change management. And it just made us a lot more aware when we're implementing, especially with AI projects, we see, because there's often a process change that the humans have to follow. And then when they don't follow it, we blame the technology when it's really about the human behaviors. So just awareness, everybody speaking the same vocabulary, lessons learned. The whole course really gives you an opportunity to be very hands-on with your learning. It's a great methodology. I don't know if you guys can see that ProSci. I have a little brochure on my desk all the time. So common language is great. One of the really quick, blunt tactics we do is identify the process, what needs to change, how much of it is human-based, how much of it is dependent on humans having to behave differently or know how to do something differently. Quite often, we'll put a new web form on, or just we'll address it from a technology perspective, but if you build it, they won't come. You have to really, and there's a reason we have to communicate 7 times, is because people have to access it, they have to read it, they have to understand it, they have to agree with it, they have to try it, and then they have to master it, and so forth. So there's lots of off-ramps. When we're inundated with information, there's lots of off-ramps. So we really need to have a continuous approach to change management, measure those failure points, and just formalize it in our program plans. And we're so fixated on technology, which is great, but the human side of the project plan really needs to be a section that's addressed. Otherwise, it'll fail. A great idea, poorly implemented, is a bad idea. And we'll blame the technology when it's really the people in the process that is the problem.
And Craig, you guys are going through a really extensive process of defining what your change objectives are. And so where are you guys in the process? What are you learning? What could we take away from your lessons?
Well, thanks, Rex. Firstly, Laurie, thanks for that. A little bit about me. My strength finders include command and achieve in the top 5, which means I'm really good at taking the hill, and I'm really bad at looking behind me to figure out who got left behind and who's on the ground. So I'm an engineer by training. I work for a team of 5,000 people in the organization. I lead a division of about 120. I've been fascinated by the whole AI capacity. Actually, fascinated is the wrong word. Frightened by the inability for business to change fast enough to not literally go out of business. We know that's happening. I saw internal information from one of our big bankers, Morgan Stanley, what's happening to accounting firms in terms of valuations. And this is an earthquake that most people don't know yet what that is. So with that said, what we've been working on is, and there's a couple of layers, I'll try to be succinct on it. The first one that keeps on coming up and is slowing us down the most is security of data, security of processes. And at a company our scale, we're a target for ransomware. We're a target for any kind of bad actors. And we also have, interestingly enough, clients. On one hand, I heard about one this last week that said, if you don't use AI and we find out you're not using AI on our project, we're going to fire you. And then on the same week, the same engineer had another client with a contract that said you cannot use AI at all. And so we're in this really strange time of figuring out as an industry, as a business world, what that looks like. On a practical sense, we're layering into, I would say, 4 buckets. First bucket, and these are hierarchical, is personal productivity, which people are figuring out. People know for the most part how to use some of the basic capabilities. They don't know the more advanced tools. We have a couple of our team are running around with OpenClaw, and we cannot tell our IT team that you're doing anything with OpenClaw, but then extending that across, and we see that stuff coming. So personal productivity. The second is these layer of engineering tools or specific consulting tools that get developed either independently or they start bridging together. The third one is what our class is enterprise-wide data. David, you mentioned about the speed. The speed isn't just in the expansion of what's happening from a technology point of view, but a complete rethink in how fast you can move. One of my team built a really powerful agent over a 3-day period, didn't spend 3 days doing, which is a contracts review. And we're referencing it against AIA contracts, against a whole bunch of things, against our insurance requirements, and it'll spit out. That kind of thing we would have said 2 years ago. I would have said that's a 1-month minimum exercise to code it, to get it and test it. And now we're doing it in days, which then leads to the big learning. And there's the enterprise-wide things that affect everyone. So that tool would affect everyone in the company. The big one, I think, is rethinking entirely what a process of delivering a service is. And it's incredibly hard to get out of the mode. What we're doing now is we're building these agents that take the current way we're doing things, where we take the bite-sized pieces, shortening them, then starting to link them together. And that's a problem with the speed at which we pace on that, people having to think faster. I'm in a design team. People are losing that time to process, to think, and we haven't yet figured out how to manage that. But then the big one is where we say we've got all of these steps. These steps have been built over, in our industry, more than 100 years of process. What if we're completely thinking about that incorrectly? That we should be skipping over all of these steps because AI allows us to do that. Just thinking about the possibilities is very difficult. For me, at least, I know it there conceptually. To be able to rethink that process, you almost want to have someone who knows nothing about what we do come in and write a process and then say how we're going to get there. So those are the things that are really challenging, and we're having a lot of leadership discussions. We have a citizen developer forum that we're building up and say, come in and play, which sometimes annoys IT because yesterday they shut off access to Claude. So now because everyone's using Claude in kind of risky ways, I hope that might at least tell you a little bit where we are and what we're unpacking.
We're building our context window, right? That's. And Ryan, how about for you guys? I know you've got a big initiative and your folks are doing a lot of coding. The change management side, what are you finding and what are you learning in that process?
Oh boy, we're learning how much we don't know and how much has to be rethought, I think, to the previous comments. So Rex, just for everybody, I'm Chief Strategy Officer for OFS Brands. We're a 4th generation office furniture, office, healthcare, hospitality, education, furniture manufacturer. In my role, I've been tasked with 2 other executives on our team, our Senior VP of Technology and our Senior Vice President of Human Resources, to develop our AI strategy and roadmap. In addition to how we are looking to deploy it, we have a lot of existential questions. Also, what's this do to our industry? What's this do to white collar jobs? How does that affect the ability for solopreneurs to build 8, 9, 10 figure companies? what is that going to do to the market opportunity and design and distribution and all the things that go with that? We venture in and out of existential versus the practical day-to-day tasks and jobs to be done. I would say we're early when it comes to thinking of it from a systems approach. We're pretty far into it when it comes to using it as an enabler to get jobs done. I would say we've been able to at least double the output capacity of our technology teams and the software and code they're able to write and deploy. Our content teams are using it daily. Our podcasting teams use it daily. We're allowing a lot of experimentation before we really start to put some more structure to it. Security, as mentioned earlier, is top of mind with our IT folks because we're also a target for hacks. And we've got a couple board members that have been hacked in the past. So there's a lot of sensitivity around what we do and do not expose. Yesterday, I was having a conversation at the coffee pot with one of our head of software developers around, is it going to be NPCs or is it going to be something like her? Are we moving from a UX environment to now this new concept around harness experience design? And how do we, because I think we can all agree we don't want more apps or more conduits to get our work done. We want less. And so we're looking at it from a lot of ways. How does this reshape our industry? And then how do we reshape our company? And again, as everybody mentioned, the process and just completely unremembering everything we've ever done and thinking of it differently. And then I've got a supply chain background prior to my sales and marketing background. So I think of it in terms of how do I move things as efficiently as possible from A to B, and how do I optimize every other step in between? As we look through those different lenses, is how do we challenge the status quo? And that's something I love to do. I love to creatively destruct things. That's why we got to have other people around me so we don't get too out of control too fast. But it's an interesting time. I think it's going to fundamentally change everything in our business, how we even connect all of our machinery and our machine code on our shop floors all the way to the end user's fingertips as they're designing furniture. It's literally writing the code at our machines to do the proper machining and those subsequent operations. Very exciting times.
So, Stephen, you look at this both from the kind of the broad view down into how does this affect business models and change just how we do work in general. And so listening to these, what are some of the thoughts and the insights that you're coming up with?
I would say, yeah, these comments are really interesting and helpful. For background, I'm a reformed private equity executive, so I used to build and fix things and turn around. I got about 15 years ago to do my own wander on projects I wanted to work on, if you were with Rex. And where I've been spending the last 6 years or so is a lot of what toggles between my background is heavily execution oriented, but I always watched management teams and companies. And I got to this point where there's so much speed of change and communication and the human issues as to strategically having a hard time finding what they were doing or why. And I began to think that the bigger arbitrage was helping reorient them. So that's the real big picture. So I watch a lot of situations. I get involved when I find there's a really interesting arbitrage, when I hear somebody talking about an opportunity or a group of people that's outside my expertise domain, which is where I prefer to operate. I like being a translator or a possibilist. And so I'm fascinated by that at the highest levels with companies. On the other side, there's this whole question of what you do with it day to day and how you integrate it and on the execution things. And how you balance that seems to be the real issue right now. I know there are a lot of people are curious of where that's going and what it means for how we think. I think Craig's comments are really interesting. I notice this all the time, and it really came out of COVID, that getting on Zoom calls, the quality of the discourse on Zoom calls, I think the nature of the fixed time periods, and they became more update meeting oriented rather than continual thinking oriented. And in fact, it drove me out of a few projects. I just didn't enjoy sitting here all day going through operational update, cultural design meetings, when what it really needed was the fluidity and the bandwidth to expand and contract. If somebody asked a lot more why and pull 3 whys down to scrape off the onion a little further. And I've talked with, I have friends who are senior people in media and other creative architecture. And I said, what's the quality of your work like with all this? And he says, we have more capabilities than ever, but we're struggling. The product quality has gone down, and it started with COVID. And now with the speed of AI and information ramping up and through this, the bad behaviors are getting amplified pretty severely. Some of the people who are coming in are newer, don't even think this is the norm, which is a scary thing for me. I'm on a board of a company that's doing cognitive psychology around questioning with actually one of the leading thinkers. He just came out with a new book on generation AI about humans and technology. And it's fascinating to here's a guy who's a cognitive science major out of Stanford, has been a CEO of his own startup now, was at Facebook as a product manager, Spotify. And he's very self-aware. So when we start talking about doing social media or communication things online and the human customer things, he goes, I'll be honest with you, all I know is what's happened the last 7 years. I have zero experience for any cognitive process or imagination or synthetic process before like 2019. And it's crazy when you start to ask him more, because I always fear, am I a dinosaur or is he just on the cutting edge? When you both admit your vulnerabilities, it gets really interesting. You start having really honest conversations. So that whole thing about how you storytell and make decisions, and I've just seen strategy decisions bogged down tremendously. Just really hard times with people communicating at the same level. And there's always this fear of time, and people seem out of breath and trying to jam too much content into short conversations.
Yeah. And Daniel Homrit, what are some of the challenges that you're running into in turning your company more AI oriented?
Yeah, I think what's one of the things that is interesting to hear on this is how much background is in a particular space is necessary for how to apply AI into a company. I think that's some of the things that drawing out just how much do we need to be open to other outside entities that maybe have a deeper insight on how things are evolving, and then overlay that into what that means for the company. But how do you do that without this quality issue that was just mentioned, right? That it can really undermine because it can be too disruptive and really miss a lot of the important context and nuances. I think for what I see in the security market, which is where I work, and really the physical security technology, this invasion of privacy tracking, it's way easier to do than ever. People see on the news this Flock product. I remember a Flock coming off the ground. My neighbor helped start it, lived behind me about 10 years ago. But the tracking and privacy and how people relate to this technology and AI's capability to really predict where somebody's going to be and can label people as just an algorithm of here's their inevitable behavior that this person is going to do and predict choices that they're going to make. And what's concerning is that they'll predict behaviors that people will make the wrong choice. Even if they haven't, they will predict that they'll make the wrong choice. And it puts people in a very disruptive state to try to defend themselves. And AI is, I would say, creating a lot of accusation. But in a time of uncertainty, security becomes what people latch onto. There's this very concerning aspect of even more security, more constraints, less privacy. Do I privacy for security? Because I can't predict where things will be. And I think that they're putting too much confidence and hope that's what's going to keep them safe and secure. That's my perspective, at least.
Yeah. And Trey, I know you've got developers and you're creating software platforms and making this transition. And recently it's been interesting to watch Amazon, who laid off 16,000 people, only to engineers, only to begin bringing them back. And Intuit is now bringing back humans, and Meta is bringing back engineers. Amazon had some major shutdowns because of the code problems. What are you seeing? It feels like everyone's moving so fast, as Craig was saying, that we're not fully aware of where the agents begin and the humans leave off, and vice versa.
Yeah, so I've developed technology products for many years and written lots of code. And we've been recently using mostly Claude to help us with that. And I've been trying to pick at something that I can't quite put my finger on, but I feel like it's circling around. So I've been trying to get a bottoms up experience with this. I'm using it every day. I have a Tesla that drives me around, and I'm just like, what is this doing to me as a person while I'm using it? And trying to figure out how to solve the problems that we're facing. And the problem that we're facing is I feel like over the last 6 months, I shipped a lot more customer value before we started using AI. It's so easy to fix something or do something, but there used to be this constraint that would force us to decide to work on the things that were important. And my wife, she runs a classical school, and we've been talking a lot about this and realizing that our students, sometimes we'll have them write papers and written in cursive and compare what they are to what papers are written on a computer. And oftentimes the papers that are written with a constraint are better. They force something out of it. And the weird thing that I'm experiencing is I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to handwriting code, but there's something valuable about limiting the throughput. And I don't know what that means or how to fix that, but there's a book, I haven't read it yet, I've been meaning to read, but I've read a synopsis of it, and it's by Ian McGilchrist called The Matter with Things. And he talks about how the left and the right brain work together. And I'm probably summarizing this wrong, but it's something like this, where the left side of the brain hemisphere has a model of the world that it uses to predict and make decisions. And the right side is integrating new information. And there's actually an artificial limit to the amount of new information the right hemisphere can feed the left hemisphere. And in people where that limit is opened up or doesn't have any constraints, it creates psychosis. It's so fast. Your model of the world changes so quickly, you paralyze yourself. And so there's actually a biological enforced limit to the amount of new things that we can integrate that protects us. And I'm just personally
He's one of the best cross-discipline synthesizers of this I've ever read. Master and Emissary is a precursor to that book, which is, if you're going to read Matter of Things, I would read that first. They are long slogs. But he attempts to synthesize this, and it's absolutely fascinating because he does provide a very good distinction neuroscience-wise and philosophically about the left and the right and what they do, what we thought they did, and the holism that we're losing the priority of due to the Great Run starting in Journey of Light.
Even that, is there a connection between the speed of things and then that that kind of constraint as being a part of reality itself that has to exist?
Yeah, I think constraint is very important, as is making errors. Evolution is based on mistakes. It's evolution, and you need those mistakes to continue to adapt. So getting to efficiency and perfection and repeatability, you don't have that. I think constraint actually forces some of those. It's a perturbation into any system. And I think that's super important. And these are really hard, complex topics, what level you're talking about. But I think it's the essence of the problem. It's back to E.O. Wilson. We have Paleolithic brains and medieval institutions and godlike technologies. And that's not the most accurate summary I've seen for years.
One more quick story. I think this is connected, but I had a strange experience. My car was driving my family and I to the airport. And in typical Tesla fashion, you can go from sloth mode to Mad Max mode in your self-driving. And Mad Max drives 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. Long story short, it didn't pick up a speed limit sign that decreased. And I got a ticket. I got pulled over. I wasn't even driving. And, it was going 15 over or something like that. I got the ticket. I told the cop I was sorry, and we went on our way. And I was driving to the airport. I realized, I was like, I don't feel that upset about this ticket. Like, why don't I feel more upset? We're getting ready to go on vacation. And I was like, this is not normal. Usually this will ruin my day or really tick me off. And then I realized subconsciously, I wasn't driving. There's a part of my brain that is not registering that I was responsible for this ticket because I technically wasn't the one driving. And I was like, if you scale that up, if we start abdicating responsibility, I don't know, the AI said to do it. It terrified me. I was like, this is a very small problem. A speeding ticket. I think about these things and it's already affecting my subconscious. And I should be more upset about that ticket. That was irresponsible. and I wasn't. And it goes back to that idea of like how this is affecting us biologically is very fascinating to me.
Some of the work I've done over the last 50 years is looking at how our dominant communication platforms or media actually rewire our brains. And there's a domino effect of the kind of leadership that comes out of those platforms and the kind of organizational structures. And of course, it all begins with oral culture. And that's that original, organic, holistic way of looking at the world and experiencing the world. And then we move into the print era, which changed our brains to this more linear, literal, principle based, which gave the foundations for science. And then we move into a broadcast era, which changes more to the right brain effect. If you watch television, for example, your brain is putting that pattern together. If you took a photograph of the TV screen, you'd see all these pixels and it would be very grainy. But your brain puts those patterns together in this fluid side and it bypasses the analytical side completely. We trusted different kinds of leaders. And the best example of that is the Nixon Kennedy debate, where those who listened to it on radio judged that Nixon was the winner, and those who saw it on television saw Kennedy. And then we changed our institutions around that emotional area. And then we move into the digital world. And one of the best videos that I've ever seen is this little infant baby playing with an iPad and just completely immersed in it. And then the parents give her a magazine to play with, and she's trying to poke it and move it. This is an infant getting totally frustrated with this magazine experience. And then the conclusion was that Steve Jobs rewired my baby's brain, and a magazine is essentially an iPad that's broken. So what Trey is talking about, this is happening to us. And we used to talk about digital natives and digital immigrants. Now we've got a generation of people in real life immigrants, people who don't have a primary experience with real life. These things have changed us both biologically, fundamentally in our brains, which ripples into organizations. I was with a leader yesterday, and one of the impacts, and I'll get Daniel Tubbs on here on education in a minute, but in one of the research projects we found is that we've got the least resilient generation in North American history, least resilient. And that the challenge of reskilling, life skilling, the new generations coming in, that's going to fall on corporations. So not only do we have this huge technological shift, but we've got this huge social dynamic shift that organizations are going to have to carry, and the burden of that. And I have yet to see an organization who is factoring that in and actually building the foundations of reskilling these individuals to understand what resilience is. In America, 70% of high school graduates cannot qualify for the military physical. They've had to downgrade the physical just to let people get into the Army. We don't see it directly connected to this media conversation, and AI is a medium and it's a platform of communication. And then in 1971, Alvin Toffler talked about future shock, relating it to culture shock, that kind of that psychosis that Trey was talking about that happens when change happens too quickly. And then in 2004, in a book that I wrote, I called it vertigo. The volatility of the changes, or the peaks and valleys, are so great and happening so quickly that we have no sense of where our compass is. And AI only elevates that, because LLMs have no foundation of grounding truth. They don't know what's right. They don't know what's wrong. And the problem is that there's this cognitive bias called the fluency bias. If something comes through very smooth, very quick, and very confident, we give it credibility. And it could be totally wrong. And we've heard stories of all of that. So the human side of this, Nesbitt wrote a chapter called High Tech, High Touch and Megatrends. And he said, as something goes, the more something goes on the technology side, it has to be counterbalanced by the human side. So as we're getting sucked into this fear of missing out and this accelerated pace to try to stay up, we're actually falling further behind because we can't go any further than our human capacity and our social capacities to understand and manage these magic things that we've built. I'll move to Daniel Tubbs to talk about, in your world is the education world. And I'd be interested in what you're seeing and what companies like Craig's and Ryan's and other companies, what they're going to be receiving in terms of the future workforce.
It's interesting because I spent my career in K-12 and I've spent the last 3 years in higher ed. And it's the same issue, I think, that we've had for a long time. You had mentioned reskilling, right? Let's think about that. So industry needs to reskill individuals coming into the workforce in order to get them ready to do basic tasks, right? K-12 was set up to provide skills necessary for industry, for factories, for the various things, right? So for the past, 30 years, industry has been saying, hey, we need different things. For example, most of my students that would graduate who were good at math, what do they want to be in the last 10 years? I'm in Virginia. They want to go to Virginia Tech. They want to be engineers. That's what we want to do because that's what the colleges were saying we need. The industry was saying we need, and the colleges were saying that. So the challenge in K-12 is always, what's the goalpost? So in K-12, we're looking at, all right, we have a student that comes in at 5 years old, and I ran the K-12 private schools. So I'm not even talking about the bigger problem, which is the public industry. And we can talk all day about the incentives that are in place in the public school system. But when you're looking at, all right, I have a 5-year-old, you as an educator, you're saying, okay, what does this child look like at 18? What kind of skills do they, we call it the portrait of a graduate. What skills do they come out with? And every educators, they're going to be this amazing, perfect person. We're going to put all these inputs in place and they're going to be a whole child and we're going to give them all these experiences. The reality of K-12 education, though, is that it does not educate the whole child. This is what Trey mentioned, that his wife's a classical educator. I do think that the classical educators understand this better than pretty much anyone else. That is that when you design your K-12 education to fit specific skills needed in industries, you're going to provide a thin education because education is more about philosophy transfer than it is about skill transfer. I had a 20-something said, man, why didn't I learn how to do taxes in school? And I said, school was to teach you how to think critically, and tax laws change every year. So you should be able to have the intellectual understanding to understand what you need to do to pay taxes. It's not actually that difficult when you're a W-2 employee. We talked about that. When you think about what is the goal for education and how is AI affecting it, the way I have thought about AI, there's plenty of people on here that could correct me, but the way I've thought about it is a thought partner. But you can only have a thought partner when you already know what good looks like. A 6th grader, a 10th grader does not know what a good work product looks like in their classes, right? The problem with AI is they say, write me an essay, and they're like, okay, that looks good to me. They don't have the standards to judge by. So I think that's the biggest challenge in providing the proper skill set for all of you when you're hiring people, is that industry does need to know that they're going to have to educate on the things that they need to educate on. What are you looking for? You're likely, the people that I've talked to, they're looking for basic human skills. And like Rex mentioned, they're growing up with stunted social abilities. emotional intelligence they have high emotional intelligence in sort of self-awareness, but very low social and emotional intelligence in others' awareness. And so it's an interesting dichotomy that the education really needs to do less with the industry specific skills, in my view, and more with human skills, critical thinking, math understand, just the basic reading, writing, arithmetic. Whenever you develop a whole industry where people's livelihoods are dependent upon it and their pensions, they're going to create new things to experiment with our kids on. And it ends up always being stuff that they don't actually need to be human. But at the end of the day is we need to use AI to allow us to be more human, not less.
So as you're seeing the traditional education model breaking down and the forecast of up to 40% of these smaller colleges going out of business in the next 5 years, if you were consulting to an organization like OFS or BGIS or Salis O'Brien, what do they have to be thinking about now in order to help that new workforce on board properly?
As best as you can, get them before they go to college. And there's a lot of workforce development that is trying to do this. But if you can develop a program with high schoolers, the problem with high schoolers is their brains are so poorly developed. You're going to have a lot of failures. You're going to have a lot of flameouts and that type of thing. So it requires a lot of structure for it. And it's hard to get them motivated to do something difficult. So that's where I would say you dip into homeschool networks, you dip into classical education, you dip into areas where, and then there's good public schools that do things well. So if you find areas where they take real education seriously, they're more concerned about the development of the child rather than the career of the adult, then you're going to find people who are willing to do things differently. When you can dip into them in high school, then you can help them come through, whether they go to college or you have a on-site training program.
Yeah, I've also seen the rise in the effectiveness of the new kind of VOTEC, now the Career Technology Advanced Learning Centers, where they're learning coding and forensic science and culinary arts and how to run businesses. Usually the kids that get attracted there, the mechanics or the people going into cosmetology or something like that, they're attracting robotics and aeronautics folks, and their test scores are even higher than the traditional places. In North Texas, there's a whole network of these advanced career technology, advanced learning centers coming up. And the organization that I sit on the board here, they try to link what does the workforce need. So that might be another place for companies to look into for a pipeline of talent, to be able to give the criteria. These are the kinds of skills we need.
I have a young man who lives with me who did not go to college and started in HVAC. And the HVAC company provides him a very specific path to making a career of it. And he's really doing well. He's only been in it for a year and a half, and they're moving him through. He's a very hard worker and all of this stuff, but they're giving him a path, and he doesn't have to go in debt to have a career.
Nice. Amanda, I don't know if you're in a place that you want to weigh in or ask any questions.
Fascinating discussion, you guys. Sorry, I'm driving, so thanks for letting me listen in. The only thing to add is just really, this is the first generation that's also measured to have actually lower intelligence than their parents. Just to pile on to some of the concerns about educational systems and what's happening. I think I like their conversation about whose responsibility is it to raise these kids up. And I can't help but wonder if a lot of this is also around time and intention, which you have to have almost 2 working parents to make ends meet these days. A lot of kids spend a lot more time on digital electronic devices rather than with a stay-at-home mom, as may have been traditionally done. I've just written a book titled Work for What's Next that's about to launch. That's really around how we need to design work to be more flexible for the future, because a lot of the rules around work were built when a lot of the main knowledge workers had stay-at-home wives, for example. But I think that these kids need more attention at home too. I don't think it can be only on the education system and only on the companies that are coming in. There's a piece of me that says that these kids maybe need different focuses at home too, giving more flexibility at work. I built the company on a fully remote model. Doesn't mean the office is not important. I work in the same industry that Ryan does. So I think the office has a big purpose, and used wisely will continue to in the future. But I think we do have to think about some of these balances and whose responsibility it is. The second thing I wanted to say real quick is I also have a 17-year-old, and we are just starting college hunt for him. And the pressure on these kids, he goes to the Illinois Math and Science Academy. So it is a top school in Illinois. He got a 31 on his ACT, and he's super disappointed because all of his classmates are getting 35s and 36s, and he can't even get into the school that my husband and I went to, where I literally filled out an application in study hall. The pressure on these kids is really great. And I think that a lot of them are really folding under that pressure. It's this gritless generation, we might want to call it, but it's not their fault. I think we have to figure out how these systems can help them. Anyway, that's what's running through my head, but thanks for letting me listen in today, guys. This was really interesting.
What I want to do, Bob, get your input and then invite David Hurley, having heard all this. And I'll give a little preamble before David checks in here on what really interested me and what he's doing. Bob, why don't you weigh in on some of the things you're seeing and some of the questions you're asking?
I'll just share an interesting experience. I watched that podcast that you sent with Dan Martell, and I turned it on, and I wasn't intending to watch the whole thing, but I got totally sucked into it. And his perspective is so different from what I had imagined AI to be. And I just found the thing fascinating. But then what I did was I basically went to Claude and tried to download Claude for Chrome on my browser, because he's describing the system of how he works. And it actually parallels to what Craig was saying earlier about stopping, basically don't overthink it, let the AI do the work for you. So when I download this Claude for Chrome on my browser, immediately I get this warning, be careful, there's threats, this will make decisions for you and it could spend money for you. And so I thought, all right, I'm already in over my head. And so I immediately took it off my computer because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But I feel like I am in a blender right now. These things are happening so quickly and I'm trying to keep up with it, but it's just, the change is incredible.
So David, you've listened to this conversation, and one of the things that really caught me was your article on websites have to be totally redesigned, because what AI looks for when it goes to a website versus a human is completely different. I'd love for you to jump in here and just give your thoughts on what you've heard and where you see the future going.
This has been a really fascinating discussion, and I've appreciated hearing the different insights. So thank you for the invite. Thank you for the opportunity to be in the room with such a diverse group of people. It has been really a pleasure, because I get to sit in on a lot of different groups at a lot of different stages of their AI knowledge base and where they're at in their personal growth and their exploration on the topic. It is a refreshing feeling to be amongst people that seem to have a stronger understanding, maybe, of maybe not directionally where we're going, but maybe a better understanding of where we are than many do today. I have spent time with people that are struggling with far less of debate and discussion and worry and concern about job replacement and about how it impacts them. I think it's interesting, as you talk to people at different levels within an organization, their opinion and views on AI shift. And I think that when you talk to people outside of an organization, they also have a different viewpoint. I'll share a couple maybe that I have encountered, viewpoints, thoughts that are correlative to the discussion that we've been having today. One in particular that, Dan, I'm really sorry, you've heard me talk about this individual before, so you'll unfortunately just tune me out for a little bit. But he's an engineer in an enterprise. And one of the things that I've been struck with as we've been talking about this retooling is the constant theme of the speed with which this entire industry is expanding and growing. It's reminiscent of a tweet that I saw just recently that said the best job that you can have right now is to be unemployed, because then you actually have the capability and the bandwidth to process the amount of information that is changing and growing on a daily basis. And the reality of that is incredibly truthful. That's the situation that unfortunately many people are finding themselves in. And I've had the opportunity to have dinners and discussions with venture capitalists. I do a lot of circles in that realm. And so their thinking is all about those companies that they would like to invest in, and how AI is being implemented in all those different companies. And they have a different mindset about how they view AI. One of the topics that they come out with was AI will empower more individuals to create those companies and create an opportunity for themselves and create business. I'm sure you've all heard the term single human company or a zero human company. I've been doing a lot of work in that realm. If we have time on another day, I'd love to tell you some of the stuff that I've been doing there. It's fascinating to me because I think then we really start to dig into some of those existential questions, Trey, like you were asking about, what do I think about and what am I responsible for? It then leads into the question of, well, what am I here for? Right? So we start to get into deeper and deeper questions. What is the work for? What am I actually doing with my time? And do we need to slow down the work because that's what's important? Or is the output really what we want? And so therefore getting to the output faster is more desirable. There's all sorts of questions that come into play there. Cycling back to the VCs and their conversation that everyone is going to be lifted up with this power of AI, mixing that now in your mind with that same concept of the tweet that I just shared of the speed of development and innovation in the space, you can start to see that we're going to have a problem because all these individuals that are in enterprise are being tasked daily with, this is your milestone, this is the Gantt chart, these are the jobs and the tasks and the customers that you report to do today. None of that did I mention AI or study the future or read the next white paper that came out or study about what the groups are that you need to be involved in or learn it for yourself. None of that is involved in that. So they're daily getting further behind living in an enterprise life. While the tool's getting better every day, I love to say this is the worst it's ever going to be because it just gets better at just an exponential pace. And the only way that you can stay on top of it is if you're doing nothing but that, you come to this really odd crux and you come to a problem and you start to say, okay, so what do these people do? And the VC's mindset is they're just going to build their companies and they'll be personally, independently sustainable, right? And we'll invest in hundreds, thousands more startups. And so now, let me take you back to Don. He's my engineer friend that I told you Dan has to just listen to. He's an engineer at a large company. And he's saying, you know what? I see the writing on the wall. I see the future of where the tech space is going. Our days are numbered from a coding perspective. We switch into management, but those days start to become fewer because we have more that we can control. I'm concerned for my future. And I'm like, light bulb, I'm going to get this guy to go through what these VCs are saying. This is the path for him. Because first of all, a little bit of backstory, this guy, he's a flipping genius. If anyone that I'm going to say, man, he's slightly on the spectrum because he's so incredibly gifted when it comes to coding, it's this guy. So he knows how to work with code, but he has not worked with AI because he's been in enterprise. And sure, he's heard about it. He's dabbled with it on the side because, again, he's a techie and he's a 10x engineer by far. Here's my opportunity. And I said, you know what? This is your space. Because of AI, you're going to be able to create anything you want. And with just a little bit of agency, you're going to be in complete control. And he said, that sounds great. I've got a little bit of agency. What should I work on? And my thought was, first of all, we lack the concept of understanding agency here because you have to think for yourself, and the critical aspect of the thinking of what you want to create is on you now. That's not anyone else to deliver to you. So there was obstacle number one. Then we come into the technical challenges. Now, this has been interesting, and I hope I'm not boring you, and I'll try to talk faster, but I've had opportunity now for about 3 months to be working with him and talking with him about his AI levels and where we're at today. I told you, he's a 10x engineer. Seeing how he progresses, he is moving at leaps and bounds in his abilities. It's incredible to watch. The ability for someone that doesn't understand the space to get to a baseline and then to begin to progress into it, it's stunning with the time to be able to devote to it. He's taking time off to do this and to focus on it. And yet even then, he's still at the speed that he's progressing at, like lightning fast, ginormous steps. We're still moving faster. We're still moving ahead. There's still concepts that I'm telling him about that he reads my message 6 weeks later and he's, oh, you already mentioned that to me. He's still lagging. And now it comes to, okay, but now can we build a business? Can he just create something? So this is exciting. And I'll keep you guys abreast of this if you're interested, because I've been coaching him a little bit on the side. That's not my thing. He's my friend. That's why I'm helping him. And I've nurtured him for a long time. He worked in one of my companies at early days, but he came up with an idea, government based. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Good luck with that, but we're going to try for it. And so we've been working through this. He had his first meeting yesterday with the local government, town council. They gave him the green light, thumbs up to build out this platform. He's using AI to help them look at their bills and do minority report delinquencies, payments, stuff like that. Really interesting. It's going to be a really interesting story to see how it goes for him and see if it's actually something where he can turn it into a sustainable business of sorts. It's so fascinating to see the questions that he has as he progresses on this journey, because he's suddenly at the point now, because of his AI assistant, Lisa, which is OpenClaw, which, by the way, I helped to write, so I'm a little bit partial to it. Glad that you're testing with it. Completely understand the security concerns. I would say that's user error, not software error in that case. But it's been interesting to see that his questions shift from thinking about the technical challenges of what he needs to do to more about, oh, I need to incorporate my business. Now I need to figure out, how do I go about structuring what an agreement looks like? What does that agreement need to be? It's going to introduce an entire new category of job opportunities for individuals or assistants or other things to help those individuals that are outside their comfort zone and that are exploring new things. And it is a dangerous and scary world for them because they're not used to this type of thinking at all. And I still have a pretty big bet against him, I'll be honest. And that's something that I'm keeping on this side of the table. Would never share that with him. I'm cheering for him and helping him every way possible. But my gut says there's an underlying premise flaw here that has to be addressed, that's not being addressed by trying to give him tools. And I think that still has not been completely sussed out. But on my blog or website, you can see the startups that I'm currently backing or involved in. There's a bunch of zero human companies, single human companies on there. There's some that have been pretty successful, which I'm excited about. And then I've written a bunch of papers that are in the ArcSiv style paper being published. And then I've also got blogs. It's dbhurley.com. It's just my name. I can post a link or share it with the group. But I've got a lot of thoughts on my blog in that world because I'm thinking a lot about this space in particular as we look at what we should be focusing our time on and what we should be spending our time doing and whether it's the same work that we're doing today or not.
So David, can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
I'm curious, for somebody that I feel like I'm at a pretty low level in all of this, where does somebody go to learn and keep up with this stuff?
That is a really intuitive question. It's usually one of the questions that get asked by somebody that's trying to quickly catch up or learn on the topic. And it is hard because it is everywhere and everyone has a different learning style. So I'll be hesitant to just prescribe the best way to do this. What I can do is share my use case, which is admittedly abnormal, and what I would recommend. So for my personal use case, I use Twitter, X, as my primary source of media news consumption. And people laugh and think that I'm on social media. My X does not look like other people's Twitters. It's like ArcSiv feeds because you can subscribe to specific feeds of the arcs of posts. So you can get specific arcs of feeds of all the posts that come out on AI. And then you can get specific stuff that drops from Google DeepMind or from OpenAI or from Anthropic. Mine's extremely highly curated. And I've got, I think it's a list of 300, 400 AI influencer leader people that I currently have been spending time. They're my core influencers. Beyond that, just read a ridiculous amount. It's one of the very few skills I have is I can read ridiculously fast. It's more than speed reading. And so in today's world, it allows me to consume an enormous amount of data super fast. I use a lot of current media and current news. So I'm usually just reading the news headlines every day across all the major news outlets. They are late stream. They come out secondarily. First stuff always hits Twitter first. X is the best place to get hot news coming from any topic. I really would recommend that be the place that you look at. Beyond that, Reddit is another fantastic source, but that's more evergreen and less of timely news feed. In order for my personal feeds, I also have Feedly set up with a bunch of RSSs to specific blogs that come through. What's the big one? Usually that's my order of operations is Twitter is a constant, just real-time stream of what's happening in the industry. I'm usually always catching up. Lately, I've been using it with a custom feed for Chinese Twitter translated, because you can get Chinese Twitter AI feeds translated in real time through Grok or whatever. And the results give you access to the startups in that ecosystem environment, which are obviously extremely different culturally than you would get in the Western. So it's an opportunity to see stuff also on a different time scale, right? So I love to have stuff that's showing up constantly. What I recommend to most people is trying to identify a couple of key figures that are influential in the space, that are not influencers in the space. Too much information for you here, but I just want to give you how I get knowledge, information stuff, so you can figure out what might work for you.
So David, thank you. So I'll give one of my hacks on this. This tells you where my level is. I use Notebook LM, and I'll just find topics that are of interest that are similar, like what is an LLM and what's the difference between reinforcement learning and how LLMs work. And I'll upload several YouTube videos into there, and I'll have it synthesize it for me. So I can take 30 hours of content and just get to the points where I'm at least functionally knowledgeable on them. And then I'll do that across several topics, like the dystopian view of what's going to happen, or the financial bubble. I've got 30 things in there, or the utopian view, or the medical breakthrough. So I've got those different areas. So I'm at least functionally aware of what's going on there. If there's documents, I will load them up to Speechify and then listen to them in the car. So I will summarize everything, and I do better listening. So that's one of my hacks. I will say to David's thing on agency, Gallup says that 50% of the workforce goes through the motion. In other words, they will do a good job if you tell them what to do, troubleshoot for them, and make sure they did it. 20% are actually detracting or toxic. Those are the people in jeopardy. The difference between that 50% is that they show no agency. They need to be told what to do. If you need to be told what to do, have someone help you troubleshoot, and then have someone accountable. That's called an agent. One of the reskilling jobs we all have is to move people more to that front end of agency, continuous learner. That's not a plug for Genius Spark, but that's part of what we're doing with Genius Spark, is shifting the ownership of self-awareness of what I look like at my best and how I get in my way back to the employee. So the manager is not the one who's telling them you need to do this or you need to do that. We've got that huge shift. I will take all of this together and work with my 7 assistants that I've got. They each play a different role. And I'll provide a recap of this, but also some questions as to where do we want to go in the next conversation. I'll have a choice of 5 or 6 topics that seem to rise and have some great interest. And then we'll do a round robin of this as well. I'd like to hear, is this format working for you? And I'm envisioning it sometime maybe in the fall, there's a physical, we get together and actually work better together to unpack some of the things that we're going through. But right now we're going through this exploration stage. Is this working for you guys in terms of format? What I will say, the next time, what I'd like to focus on is the change management process. And we will walk through the human side of the change process, which seldom gets pulled into the equation. Cotter's 8 steps is not a human side to change management. It's a very mechanistic way. We'll talk about how do you move and what pace can you move your organization. Some of this was developed in the mind shift process, and we've got 7 stages of dealing with complex change. The 2 big mistakes that we're making in change management is we see it as a linear path as opposed to a complex system that we're meddling with. So we don't understand the nature of the complex human system and technology systems that we have in place, and what does one change do here and what's the ripple effect. I have a colleague who's friends with the head of HR for Boston Consulting. He said another main mistake companies are making in change initiatives is that they're focusing on themselves. It's all internal. And the ones that are focusing on how do we use AI to solve our clients' problems are getting 2 benefits. One, they're getting more specific targeting on where to put their time and effort in. But secondly, it's transforming their organizations by doing that. So thank you guys very much. Wow, this was fast paced and great. And I appreciate everybody sharing.